Well, there's been some amazing ones in the previous seasons, and this latest game between United and Chelsea promises goals with two top attacks and two slightly dodgy defences, you could say, on display so far this season.
Ahead of the game, we can hear from the men in charge at both clubs. We'll bring you Frank Lampard's thoughts shortly, but first, here's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
If you lose games, you're determined, you want to win the next one, you want to bounce back, and I can see that focus before the Newcastle game, and of course after you win against PSG, that gives you more belief and confidence. So two very good performances, two good results, but then now it's the next game, and that's what we're focused on. We know it's going to be a tough game against Chelsea. We had four games against them last season, I think maybe 4 or 5 the season before, so it's two teams that know each other really well.
Yeah, I think, listen, a clean sheet always gives confidence, and that's great, but it's a very simplistic way of looking at games is to say that game because you conceded, these things were all wrong, and that game because it was a clean sheet, these things were all right. You know, my job is constantly to analyse what was good and what was bad. Some parts of our game in Seville off the ball were not as good as I wanted them to be. Our defending the box and our resilience certainly was, and that really, really pleased me. Those finer details of how we want to be off the ball, which is something I think we were really good at last year, in terms of when we were set, how hard we worked to win it back, the pressure we put on teams. That wasn't where we were conceding goals. We conceded goals in other ways, which we're very aware of. So that's always going to be constantly what we're trying to work on. But the simple answer is, I'm happy with a clean sheet and we keep going.
Well, what a game this is set up to be. Manchester United against Chelsea at Old Trafford. Glenn, it's a fixture you've played in. What are your memories of playing in this one? Oh,
it's a proper fixture. You know, it's one of them ones that at the start of the season, it's the first game you look for. And obviously, I can't remember how many times I played in it, but I remember it was always fiery, a lot of red cards, some tackles. But yeah, so you love every minute. And that's what you want to do. You know, at the time, we're pretty much the two best teams. So it's always like everyone had a lot to prove.
Yeah.
So they're definitely the best games to play in.
I think now there's a lot to prove for both of these teams as well, isn't there, Melissa? Particularly the way that both have started this season. It's been a little bit up and down.
Yeah, in a different context now. They're no longer the two best teams in the country, so there's that added. I think both managers are trying to prove that they belong at those clubs. That's one element of it. I think both need to show that there's variety in their approach. We know Manchester United are actually suited to these kind of games where they play the big teams because they can set up a reactive and defensive counter-attacking plan, which works very well. We saw it against PSG. We've seen it against Liverpool, against Manchester City, and against Chelsea last season. But if you give them the ball and let them have it, what can they do with it? Chelsea have shown to have great counter-attacking threat as well, can be quite good in possession, but when you put any sort of sustained pressure on them, they leak goals. They've solved the goalkeeper conundrum, which was obviously psychologically a massive problem for Kepa himself and for the defense and the team as a whole. There was just no confidence there. Yet we've still seen some signs that they're not completely solid at the back yet. It's a very entertaining game and an interesting one to watch because I suspect I know United will want to play on the counter. And there's just going to be goals guaranteed. No draw. You can't predict goals.
I've not. You know, Frank's Chelsea there, we know they concede goals. Lots of individual errors, which will be frustrating Frank so much. We've seen Thiago Silva against West Brom, didn't we? The ball under his foot. We've seen the goalkeeper. We've seen, Zuma's back pass. Individual errors. Look at that one there from the goalkeeper. That's going to frustrate Frank so much.
Oh, of course, because as a manager, there's nothing he can do about that. Obviously, he sets his team up through the week, puts them, obviously drills them and gets them well organised. But if players are making individual errors, there's literally nothing you can do. So you're right, it can only frustrate a manager. And it's strange to watch because I think they're decent players as well. I played with Kurt Zouma. He's a fantastic player, but very hot and cold. And I think that's what it is. I think we touched on it earlier about having that core in most teams. And Chelsea, if we had to pick their two best centre halves, we'd probably come up with 3 different ideas. So it's hard to to get that consistency when you are chopping and changing an awful lot.
And how much of that also is down to the goalkeeper? Because playing with a goalkeeper who you can trust behind you must make such a difference as a defender.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I can only imagine when in that clip there, when the ball went back to him, I can only imagine what his teammates were thinking. You know, they're probably just thinking, just kick this as far away from the goal as possible at the first opportunity. And that's sometimes what you have to do. When your confidence is low, you have to go back to the basics. So instead of him trying to, be smart, just protect yourself a little bit and just get rid of it, and then you start to make your passes and your confidence grows. But yeah, as a defender, to look over your shoulder and see, a fragile goalkeeper, it's, when I was obviously at Chelsea, we look over his shoulder, you got Peter Cech, and he would win you 15 points a season, you know. So he would get you out of trouble if someone gets a shot and it goes through your legs and you don't quite block it, it's all right, Cech's there. You have that belief that you think he's going to save everything. Of course, you don't want to rely on that, but it's just nice to know. Yeah,
the good news is that Mendy was fit enough to play in the Champions League. Chelsea kept a clean sheet there. Let's talk about Chelsea going forward, though, because attacking-wise, they're spoilt for choice, aren't they, Melissa? Who do you think he's going to go for in this game? Because we've seen Ziyech come on in the last 2 games, including that Champions League game, for Mason Mount. Does Mason Mount lose his place now?
I don't think so. I think Frank is a Mason Mount acolyte for good reason. Mason's a very good player. I know he gets some grief, a lot of grief on social media and stuff. Sometimes I don't understand why. But Chelsea have collected some of the world's best young players. Timo Werner, Havertz, we talk about them defensively, but if you look at how they recruited, it tells you that the emphasis is on their offensive weaponry. And perhaps that's why they concede so much, because there is no balance, because they are so attack-minded. The strength in the team is in those forward areas. Like Glenn said, there's not really been much of a consistency in selection, so it's hard to know because they've got such a deep squad as well. And more than personnel, I'm more interested in how they both set up, and if one manager decides to actually be the one to frustrate. I think it might be Solskjaer, because he's seen that work for him in the past. But yeah, definitely pick up the weekend's fixtures.
What do you think about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and how he's going to set up Robbie? Because in the Champions League in the week, he was given all the plaudits for team selection, for the tactics in beating Paris Saint-Germain, which not a lot of people saw coming.
It is going to be interesting. Pogba was left out. McTominay and Fred done exceptionally well. They can protect the vulnerable back four. We see no Harry Maguire in the week. Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, their performance against Spurs, the whole team as a collective defensively. Recovery runs, the intensity, you've got to sprint back towards your own goal. What McTominay and Fred have done is they do that. It doesn't matter how good a player you are at any level, the basics, the recovery runs, the attitude, the desire to run back and defend is massive, and that gives you the basis. So it's got a big decision, because they're going to have to do that this weekend against, as Melissa says, a Chelsea team who going forward are brilliant. What do you think? I think he might stick with McTominay and Fred and Fernandes as a 10 because of that defensive stability. And he knows, I think, that those two in midfield will sprint back towards their own goal.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think sometimes players like McTominay will strive on an opportunity like this, in terms of getting an opportunity playing against a top team in a big game. Manager will trust him if he puts him in. And I think sometimes you get that desire from the youngsters more. Sometimes I think bigger names can sometimes sort of think, I'm so-and-so, I haven't got to quite do as much of the dirty work as maybe somebody else. So I'd like to see him give McTominay a go and let him, crash into a few tackles and stamp his name into the game. But they're certainly going to need some help with the back four. So whether it's two sitting, and they're just going to need some bodies that are willing to run around, because they're a fantastic side. And when they work hard and they do it together, they're going to be very, very tough to beat.
Apparently, Scott McTominay played the first half with only one contact lens in.
Yeah, and
unbelievable.
That was remarkable, because he was immense, and like Robbie's saying, that was United's best defensive display, their best display without the ball that we've seen in a long time. And PSG weren't at their best, but it's still a PSG side that have Kylian Mbappe and Neymar in it. So you have to be switched on permanently, because you give them half a chance and they will hurt you. And why would you want to change that too much? Why
would you put Harry Maguire back in?
On a personal level, I wouldn't, because I think he's been going through a lot, and it's been showing in his performances. And I think especially against such a rapid Chelsea side, and just to give the players that perform so well, to give them the reward.
That would be a big statement from the manager.
I know.
The captain played at Newcastle. People were saying, should he be left out? He didn't. He played him, scored the header. Good performance. Would be a massive statement for the manager to leave your captain out because they've done so well. I totally agree, Melissa, against PSG.
So well,
they've done so well. If you leave your captain out in that game, that is a big call.
But do you operate on sentiment now, or do you? So I think that's the call you're having to make.
Would you leave him out?
I would leave him out.
If I'm Timo Werner, I'll be like, please play him.
Wow.
Yeah, I really would. Just I think he would be an absolute nightmare for him. But I agree. In the bigger picture, it's hard to leave your captain out. And obviously, he's a big player for him, so it is hard to leave him out. But on that last performance, if I'm Twanzebe, I'll be thinking, well, why aren't I playing?
Yeah, very interesting. Glenn mentions Timo Werner there. Finally off the mark in the Premier League in the last game out. 2 goals in that match against Southampton. And I think what the Chelsea fans were so happy to see is that he's actually playing as a striker now, played down the middle, Mel.
Yeah, Lampard has, like I said, collected the best young players in world football, but they've not always played in the positions that he recruited them to play in, which obviously when you're adjusting to a new league, when you're adjusting to a new manager's demands, to not do it where you're comfortable just makes it that much more arduous of an adjustment period. But Timo is just made of goals. He knows before the ball's anywhere close to him, he knows what he wants to do with it. And he will score so much because Chelsea will create so much for him. And I think we've seen with Kai as well, when he's played as a more traditional sort of playmaker, he is exceptional. It's a very, very, very good team that Chelsea have got. It's just one lacking balance.
Do you know what? Just before we move on, as a midfield player there, if you've got Giroud in the team, when the ball comes to midfield, you can't hit that one round the corner because he's not going to run in behind. So with Timo Werner, we see that second goal there where he chipped it over the goalkeeper. Midfield player comes back to you can put that ball in behind. It's a different dynamic for Chelsea. Oh, it is. And it's a great weapon to have. And because also, the defenders can't push up high because they've got to be afraid of that. And then the ones dropping off, the midfielders get more space. Yeah. So it just causes the opponents big problems.
And then, Glenn, go on.
I'm going to go 2-1 Chelsea.
Mel?
2-2.
Sitting on the
Wait for mine.
We'll see yours a little bit later. We'll get all of Robbie's